The Last of the Mohicans is an adventure novel written by James Fenimore Cooper, published for the first time in 1826. Cooper was born in Burlington on September 15th in 1789. He is a writer known particularly as narrator of sea stories and historical novels. He started writing to honor a bet made with his wife. He finished his first book in 1820, giving rise to a series of works in the following years, including the celebrated masterpiece The Last of the Mohicans in 1826. Franco-Indian War, mid-18th century. The story has its central theme the battles between the French and the British, with a clash between the two factions of mercenaries, the Hurons and the Mohicans, the latter allied with the British. Nettie Bumppo, a white hunter nicknamed Hawkeye, decides to live in symbiosis with nature, respecting it and knowing all its secrets. He also shares the customs and values of the Native American with the last two survivors of an ancient race, the Mohicans. This native population will have to fight the Iroquois tribe, allies of the French, led by the perfidious Magua, an Indian who was driven out of his tribe and out of the English camp by the English General Monroe. This prompted him to take revenge against the same through the kidnapping of his two daughters, also trying to regain his rightful place among his people. But a Native American family consisting of Chingachgook, his son Uncas, and the white Hawkeye saved the English company from Magua's ambush. Hawkeye Nathan and Uncas will later fall in love with General Monroe's daughters, Cora and Alice. Monroe, by now besieged by the French, is by this time next to surrender, but the hope of the colonel resides in the arrival of reinforcements. Therefore, it decides to oppose a resistance to the bitter hand. Once arrived, however, news that the reinforcements will not arrive, the English colonel stipulates a truce with the General Montcalm, head of the French army. Someone remained unhappy with the negotiations. We are talking about the cruel Magua who decides to attack by surprise with his tribe, the English, who had abandoned the fort, finally coming to kill Monroe. Luckily, Cora and Alice manage to escape from the ambush together with the Mohicans, but they are then kidnapped and taken to the Hurons' camp in front of the tribal chief in order to decide their fate. Cora will be handed over to Nathan. Alice will be given to Magua as his wife. And finally, Major Hayward will be burned alive. In order not to end up in the clutches of Magua, who had killed Uncas in a duel, Alice takes her own life by throwing herself off a cliff. Chingachgook, the last of the Mohicans, kills the Huron and later, together with Nathan, pays homage to the death of his son. The movie, released in 1992, has some differences from the novel. The famous American director, screenwriter, and film producer Michael Kenneth Mann did not like Cooper's novel at all, because he not only distanced himself from it, but also defined the author as a racist who did not understand the Native American culture. In the movie, all the racist components of the novel are thus eliminated, also changing some of the representations of the Native American provided by Cooper in the original. The director succeeds brilliantly in painting the Native American civilization in the most realistic way possible. But unlike the book, the director provides a motivation for the so much cruelty of Magua being a character in a seek of revenge. In addition, Mann emphasizes the difficulty of conveying in the movie the particularly bloody and ruthless actions carried out by Native Americans who depict cultures so different in the way they approach values and customs, making the fact of torturing someone to death somehow relative. Another distinction is that in the novel, the love story begins between Major Award and Alice, Munro's youngest daughter, while in the movie, Nathan and the official compete for the love of Cora, the colonel's eldest daughter. The last difference is found in Magua's revenge, where in the novel it does not kill the English General Munro. The topics covered by the work are various, and they take into consideration several historical aspects of the French and Indian War, including the bloody colonial battles between France and Britain, the difficulty of living within the American settlements during this historical period, the destruction of nature by human being, and in the end, the roles distinctions between man and woman in native and European societies. The First French and Indian War, also called Queen Anne's War of the 18th century, should not have involved the Native Americans, because the conflict initially arose between French and English, but the United Kingdom and French decided to move it into the North American coast, where they share out several territories. Native people from all over the region were affected by the conflict. For decades, the Native Americans had been in dialogue with British and French colonists in order to maintain a sort of independency of the area, but at a certain period in history, the Native Americans were forced to take one side of the conflict or the other. The state changed dramatically. The Iroquois and the Cherokee joined forces with the English crown, while the other tribes joined forces with the French crown that needed many troops due to the scarcity of population of its overseas territories. That is how the war in America began, taking the name of French and Indian War. The difficulty of living in such colonies was always greater. Prior to the advent of the white man, North America was in a very balanced ecological situation. But in a few centuries, the immense forests were destroyed, little hills plugged, many animals have gradually disappeared. Therefore, the nature's topic is fundamental, and it works as a background for the novel that is depicted with harsh reality, nature contaminated and hurt by the white man's actions, with the purpose of exterminating the red man as well. On one hand, it is possible to see the Europeans breaking down forests and building up fortifications. On the other hand, we can feel and find out the Native Americans' pain and the deep sorrow in their eyes at seeing their home completely violated and destroyed, place where they are born and grow up in harmony. Through the history, we can understand the serious atrocity and injustice suffered by Native American people, often deliberately forgotten and placed in the background. This war has caused thousands of victims due to economic and expensive interests of the two crowns of France and England, an entire population forced also to fight against their own people, subdued to the wills of the powerful, without having the opportunity to choose their future. Despite that, they will fight to the end without surrendering.